Thank you for joining us for the National Center for Rural Road Safety's November webinar. We're just going to give everyone a minute or two to join us, and then we'll get started. Thank you all for joining us for the National Center for Rural Road Safety's November webinar for crash responder safety. My name is Jamie Sullivan. I'm the director of the National Center for Rural Road Safety. Just a few webinar logistics for you today. Today's webinar will be 2 hours in length, so it's a little bit longer than our typical webinars. To activate closed captions for today's webinar, you can click on the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen, and you can use that same button to go ahead and adjust the captions under Caption Settings. You'll see the logo up on the top right as to what you're looking for. Additionally, we will be recording today's webinar for website archival, and you can find that on our website at ruralsafetycenter.org/webinar-archive. It should be there within the week. We do have 2 different places for you to go ahead and alert us of anything. We have a Q&A pod that you can find on the bottom of your screen. That's where you'll want to put any questions for the presenters. You can do that at any time while they're presenting, but if you could make sure that you please put those questions in the Q&A pod, it'll be much easier for us to find them, because you'll notice we're going to use the chat pod for you to do other things, such as introduce yourself, as many of you are doing right now, to others, and also to share resources with you, and you can go ahead and share resources with others as well as our presenters are going through their presentations today. If you have any technical difficulties, you can also alert the organizers by using either the Q&A pod or by sending us a private message in the chat pod. We do have handouts that are available for download. When I finish with the logistics, I will post that to the chat pod for everybody, and you can download those, the copy of the slides that you'll see today. We will at the end also have a feedback form at the end of today's webinar. If you wouldn't mind completing that, we would really appreciate it. That helps us get more information on what types of topics you're looking to hear from us in the upcoming webinars that we'll be hosting. And lastly, we will have certificates of completion for today's webinar. Those should come to your email boxes in about 4 to 6 weeks. In that email, you will also receive an application for more formal CEUs if you are in need of those from the university. I do have a few resources that I wanted to point out for everyone. We have a brand new Home Safely podcast. This is episode 5 that you can find. And in here we feature Carrie Brown, who is a program manager for the Nevada Local Technical Assistance Program and the director of the Western Tribal Technical Assistance Program. In this podcast, she talks a little bit about local and tribal road system experience, innovations that have significantly helped with data collection. And she also touches on the cultural and historical impact of governmental partnerships on the tribal approach to road safety. You can find all of the podcasts at this QR code. You can also find them again on our website, ruralsafetycenter.org, and there is a drop down for podcasts across the top of our website. Additionally, we are running our Road Safety Champion program currently. It is a Safety 101 program. We are doing our planning and engineering pathway modules right now on Tuesdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And we are also piloting our new public health modules on Wednesdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, with exception of 2 of them, PH4 and PH6, which will be held 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern. If you missed any of these and are interested in starting from the beginning with our core modules, we will be beginning these again in January, and we're getting ready to send out an email in the next couple of weeks with those dates and how you can register for those. So keep a lookout on your email box. I also wanted to let you know that the 2026 Road to Zero Community Traffic Safety Grants are now open. This is a grant that is funded by NHTSA. It is to support innovative and promising projects, programs, and research to help achieve the Road to Zero's mission of zero traffic fatalities. Recipients that are picked will be funded for 1 year for their projects, and the projects are going to be ones that address one or more components of the safe system approach to traffic safety. If you are interested in learning more about this, the link, that QR code will take you to the page, which will provide you with an informational release of information, as well as how to register for their informational webinars, which will be held tomorrow and on November 21st. Applications for these grants will close on Friday, January 16th, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're interested in that funding source, please go ahead and take a look on their website. I also want to welcome you to our webinar again in honor of Crash Responder Safety Week. The theme for this year's Safety Week is Safety Starts With You, Slow Down and Move Over, and it will go through the remainder of this week. These QR codes will take you to 2 different websites where you can find more information on this week, the daily themes, and some of the information that you can use to pass along to your communities in regards to Crash Responder Safety Week. And then we have 5 presenters for today that we're really excited for you to hear about. Our very first one is Joe Krobeth, who's the Program Manager for Emergency Responder Safety Institute. Joe leads the development and delivery of educational materials focused on emergency traffic incident management. He is a registered civil structural professional engineer in the transportation field. In addition to his engineering background, Joe has decades of fire service experience, having served as both a career and volunteer fire chief and instructor. He actively contributes to national committees responsible for developing key industry codes and standards, including the AASHTO policy on geometric design, the National Committee on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and NFPA's 502 Technical Committee, the Fire Protection for Highway Tunnels, Bridges, and Limited Access Highways. He holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, a master's degree in business administration, and is a PhD candidate in occupational safety and health, focusing on firefighter safety and health. And we're really excited to have him kick off our webinar today to talk a little bit more about Emergency Responder Safety Institute and what resources they have available for your community. So, Joe?
Great, thank you very much, Jamie. Welcome everyone to this webinar. Today I will share with you some information that I hope can be beneficial to enhance your awareness and lead to safe operations while operating or responding to emergencies on roadways. Today we begin the recognition of 10 years since the Federal Highway Administration first launched its Responder Safety Week, Crash Responder Safety Week. This week, as Jamie indicated, we're going to focus on information that is needed to ensure we are all able to return home after performing our basic job functions and safely manage the incidents on a roadway. Again, the theme for this year's event is Safety Starts With You, Slow Down and Move Over. Obviously, this message is targeted for the motoring public primarily, but it's also to protect people like many of us who respond to incidents and perform maintenance functions and construction functions on a roadway. Today and throughout this week, there will be educational programs, additional webinars, and policy discussions, all occurring and focused on promoting awareness for drivers to slow down and move over when approaching traffic incidents. We also are encouraging responders to consider new and additional training opportunities to improve your own safety. And that safety certainly does not miss out on rural roads, which are no less dangerous for our responders than the superhighways that cross our country. The rural road system, in this nation represents around 75% of all of the roadway lane miles. And as responders operate on these, they are faced with higher operating speeds on many roads that actually were never fully engineered. They experience longer response times to reach those in need. And then when they need additional resources, they have to wait longer periods of time until they can get those additional resources to mitigate the incident. Oftentimes, there's low or limited lighting levels that makes the incident that much more hazardous, or requires additional resources to bring in lighting. Often, deficient geometric designs that kind of increase the hazard, such as no shoulders on the roadway where motors can pull off, or even maintenance vehicles or emergency vehicles can park along the road to maintain safe passage. Emergency responders, including firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, towers, departments of transportation, and service patrol, are at a higher level of risk when they're operating on these rural roads. I want you to think about for just a moment the difference between temporary traffic control for construction and maintenance activities in comparison to an emergency response. So if you're a member of a DOT or a contractor and you're working on a highway, you will have already planned out your activities. Most likely, you will have had a safety briefing. You will have drawn out a plan for positioning all of the equipment and the personnel. You will have most likely coordinated the needed equipment, such as truck-mounted aero boards, truck-mounted crash attenuators, other equipment that you might need to perform functions as basic as picking up debris or any routine maintenance effort. But in the world of emergency response, those first few minutes of operation, there is no traffic incident management system in place. So emergency responders must show up on the scene. They must quickly assess what they have and then deploy the appropriate level of traffic incident management. And that can be anything from parking their apparatus along the side of the road all the way to a full roadway shutdown and detour situation. The Emergency Responder Safety Institute was created following 2 line-of-duty deaths involving members of the Cumberland Valley Volunteer Firefighters Association, which is the parent organization in which Emergency Responder Safety Institute is a committee of. Following these incidents, we ask ourselves, what really can be done? We were an organization that had very few financial resources, but we were rich in personal relationships at all levels of government and across the United States Fire Administration. And we leveraged those relationships to take our first step. We initially surveyed the 500 largest fire departments in the nation. We asked each of them to report on their experiences and their perceptions of this problem by responding to a series of questions on a survey paper instrument. And we were fortunate enough to receive some funding from the United States Fire Administration, which was quite difficult because this was 1999, right in the midst of the change in administrations between when President Clinton was in office and before the Bush administration had taken office. So out of that survey, we received a response rate of about 30% of the departments. And they all indicated that operating near moving traffic was among the greatest hazards that fire departments experience. So after this survey, we invited industry representatives from all across the country to a traffic incident management summit. And from that summit, we created a white paper titled Protecting Emergency Responders on the Highway. And this white paper is still available on the internet or on our respondersafety.com website. So this document was truly the first of this type anywhere in the country in 1999. The white paper includes recommendations covering training, operations, legislation, regulations, research, standards, and human resources. Certainly breaking information at that point in time. From this point forward, we started developing training materials, offering awareness training and promoting the Slow Down, Move Over legislation initiative. Back in that time period, there was really only one state, South Carolina, that had actually adopted the Slow Down, Move Over legislation. And our members traveled the countryside speaking at conferences and at different state legislative assemblies, general assemblies, promoting Slow Down, Move Over until all 50 states had adopted legislation. We've lobbied to incorporate training requirements in the NFPA standards for firefighter professional qualifications, advocated for minimum equipment needs and striping requirements on fire apparatus in the NFPA standards, created high visibility standards for traffic vests and so on. And then it was in 2010, with funding assistance from the Department of Justice, that we launched the Responder Safety Learning Network, which is found at respondersafety.com. Roadway incidents are without a doubt a national problem and should command the attention of all responders and members of the motoring public, as well as law enforcement and departments of transportation. Every year, thousands of lives are lost from vehicle crashes and billions of dollars in property damage occur due to inattentive drivers, these unnecessary crashes, or maybe even our failure to establish temporary control devices. These firefighters, EMS providers, law enforcement, towing operators, DOT service patrol are all placed in harm's way and face unreasonable risks to injury and death while mitigating these incidents. So effective traffic incident management is crucial for minimizing these hazards. Here on the screen, we have data from 2019 through 2025 reporting struck by deaths by responder discipline. In that 6-year period, 321 deaths, averaging 54 per year, which translates to 1 death every 6 days, which is extremely unacceptable. Today, the Emergency Responder Safety website offers the largest compilation of traffic incident management material available anywhere on the web. Our training materials in the form of videos, safety shorts, and public safety announcements for safety briefings and social media posts, as well as survival stories, are all available for your use. We post case studies and information on struck by incidents from all across the nation. You can find best practice guidelines, research reports, template standard operating procedures, access the National Struck By database, and information, educational information for distracted driving public education. The online learning network includes 48 learning modules with 3 new modules that are currently under development and will be available later in 2026. The site has over 183,000 registered users, and more than 40,000 of those registered users are organizational leaders, fire chiefs, chiefs of police, DOT directors, public works directors, and so on. As of November 1st, 2025, users represent 126 different countries who are using this material to train their staff. We experience an average of 1,700 new users each month over the past 12 months. And when those users engage with the system, they're typically spending, on average, about 38 minutes per engagement, which is pretty significant when you think about the time spent visiting a website. So the training materials are accredited by the Commission on Accreditation for Pre-Hospital Continuing Education, meaning that the material and the certificates received from our programs can be used to satisfy your certification continuing education requirements. Since its launch, the online learning network has delivered over 1 million hours of training and over 72,000 federal highway traffic incident management certificates have been issued. So these certificates are issued under an agreement with the Federal Highway Administration, where responder safety is able to issue a equivalency certificate that meets the training curriculum established by the Federal Highway Administration for traffic incident managers. And to obtain that certificate from responder safety, there are 10 separate modules that's listed on this slide. Each of those modules is about 45 to 50 minutes in length, and they are outcome-based, meaning that they have a somewhere between a 7 to 10 question quiz to complete at the end. So you can see the list: basic information, advanced warning, blocking procedures, high visibility innovations, what the manual and uniform traffic control device says about controlling traffic or managing traffic through incidents, move it or work it, making the decision whether you're going to ask the motorist to relocate their vehicles off the roadway or if you're going to manage the scene as it exists. So several others that I'll let you peruse when you can visit our site. Mainly for the fire service, you can find model standard operating procedures on our site covering safe positioning while operating in or near moving traffic, safety apparel, best practices for backing apparatus. I guess that could apply to DOTs as well. Guidelines for cone, flare, and sign deployment at traffic incidents. Again, safety apparel, and then highway lane designations and terminology, so that when emergency services is engaging in conversation with DOT professionals, they're speaking the same lingo. So these are, again, for the fire service, these are excellent resources to build a company drill around to help educate your firefighters. On responder safety, you can also access the National Struck By database to enter struck by information, or you can filter the data based on date, state, and response discipline. So responder safety is under contract with the Federal Highway Administration. We're in phase 3 of this project. Before this contract, there was no government-sponsored process to track struck by fatalities. And responder safety had been doing it for years with using volunteers, but Federal Highway then commenced and entered into an agreement with us to develop this database. And we're in, as I said, phase 4, where we're now able to pull data from the reports that are in the system. So some information that the data is telling us so far is that the placement of at least one traffic control device can reduce your chance of being struck by 50%. Tow operators who are working a disabled vehicle are 17 times more likely to be struck than when they are performing their other towing duties. Think about that. Incidents where arrow boards are used experience 65% less struck by incidents. And struck by crashes occurring in travel lanes are actually statistically less likely to result in a fatality than those that are on a shoulder, on a ramp, or off the edge of a roadway. So this is the type of data that we're pulling from the reports that have been presented or submitted to the system. So I would encourage you, whether your jurisdiction experiences a struck by incident, regardless of whether it's a fatality, injury, or just property damage, we're trying to collect data to help further the research and guide training and information to the industries. So for instance, a significant problem that the fire service is dealing with is utilizing fire apparatus for blocking devices. And so An average fire engine today costs between $1 and $1.2 million. A lot of organizations use their ladder trucks to provide blocking. They are between $2 and $4 million. And so if that vehicle is struck, you have a massive loss in property value. But not only that, current times to purchase and receive from the factory a fire engine is anywhere from 3 to 4 or more years. So you're taking a large piece of equipment out of service that could be serving your community for a long period of time. On responder safety, you can obtain access to research reports and information on standards development. Some of the national standards that we have been able to influence include the developing of an American National Standard Institute, ANSI standard for high visibility breakaway vest. One of the things that we learned quickly when we got into this awareness campaign is that firefighters and law enforcement, when they do wear a vest and they have kind of a scraping struck by experience, oftentimes something on that vehicle would catch that safety vest and drag that responder down the road with them. So we worked to create a safety vest that when it hooks on something, it breaks away. It's held together with Velcro, but it breaks away and therefore doesn't cause the responder to go with that vehicle. Following an incident in Lubbock, Texas, we realized the significance of the difference between the types of helmets that are appropriate for structural firefighting as compared to responding or working on a roadway. Structural fire helmets are designed to take the impact from a vertical drop onto a firefighter's head, whereas if a firefighter or police officer or paramedic is working an incident on the highway, they're more likely to be struck and thrown to the ground where they would hit the side of their head, which we found was creating significant traumatic brain injuries. And particularly in the incident in Lubbock, Texas, which the family of one of the lieutenants from Lubbock, Texas is shown in this picture, where I was greeting them at the National Fallen Firefighters Memorial Weekend back in 2020. So as I mentioned before, minimum traffic incident management equipment to be carried on apparatus, the creation of the NFPA 1091 standard, which is the professional qualification standard for a traffic incident manager, and then as well as also inserting traffic incident management training requirements in the firefighter NFPA 1001 training requirements. So if you're not currently a respondersafety.com user, the material is free and easily accessible. We encourage you to visit our website at respondersafety.com. You will come to a page like you see on the screen. This is our online learning network. You will see in the upper right-hand corner, there's an orange button to register. You create a username and password, and then you have the 48 modules, some of which you can see on the screen, available along with all of the other resources that I mentioned. So I hope you find this information useful, and you'll follow through with the annual Crash Responder Safety Week call to action. And in this call to action, we challenge you to, number one, acknowledge the national problem that is before us. When you respond to incidents on the highway or step out to perform your routine duties, never forget the shared problem that we all face. We ask that you consider hosting or engaging in responder safety training within the next 45 to 60 days in your organization, and that you make it a regular habit to train on traffic incident management. We hope that you'll help to spread the word and change the culture of our motoring public And then finally, that you'll link to our Federal Highway Administration's website to access additional crash responder safety toolkits and share it with your friends on your social media platforms. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joe. That was a lot of great resources that you just shared. I put a few of those in the chat pod. And again, we did just drop the participant guide again into the chat that you can go ahead and download. And all of those are also linked in Joe's presentation. Joe, we do have a few questions that came in for you. The very first one is kind of an opinion question. It is, do you think that drunk or impaired driving is one of the largest causes of these road incidents?
I absolutely do believe that they play a major role. So we refer to the problem motorist as a D driver, drunk, distracted, drugged. You know, you come up with any kind of verb that starts with a D, and that's usually a pretty good indicator of the type of individuals who are causing these types of accidents. So yes, answer the question.
Another question that came in was this person asking the question said they just saw an article about how despite slow down, move over being the law everywhere, it still has poor compliance because of lack of understanding. I'm fairly sure I learned that in Ohio, the preference is to move over first, slow down if you can't. Does that preference vary from state to state, or is it constant?
So I would say our findings are that one thing is consistent, and that is that every state has some form of legislation. But beyond that, there is no consistency. And there is a tremendous amount of research that is underway or has been taken to look at the differences. And, you know, for many years, the challenge was just to get general assemblies in all the states to adopt a slow down, move over law, because it was not an easy sell, because what you would have is many individuals coming and speaking about those bills and citing the difficulty in enforcing it. So once the legislators were able to get past that, they adopted it. Now each state has their own little nuances. And what we'd really like to see is the federal Department of Transportation come out with a more standardized template for how those laws should be enforced, right? That's why we have the manual and uniform traffic control devices, to create consistency across the nation.
The final question that came in for you is, do you know which states require aero boards on tow trucks?
I do not, sorry, I do not have that information, but it's a good one. It's a good one because of the effectiveness of aero boards.
Perfect. Thank you so much again, Joe. That's all the questions we have for you right now. And so we will move along to our second presenter, who's going to talk about a recent release of a slow down, move over report. This will be Brian Teft, who is a principal researcher for AAA's Foundation for Traffic Safety. Brian conducts and manages research on a wide variety of traffic safety issues, including driver distraction, drowsiness, and impairment, pedestrians, and roadside worker safety. His research has been published in many leading scientific journals, including Accident Analysis and Prevention, American Journal of Epidemiology, Human Factors, Journal of Safety Research and Sleep. He is a member of the Transportation Research Board's Standing Committee on Pedestrians and the editorial board of the Journal of Safety Research. He holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and a road safety professional level 2 certification in behavioral road safety. And I'm really excited to turn it over now to Brian to talk about his report.
Thank you, Jamie. And am I sharing my screen successfully?
Yes, looks great.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to share our research with your group today. I know I don't need to eat up any time convincing anybody here that protecting our emergency responders and roadside assistance providers is important. But I just want to take a moment to explain why this is especially important, not just another issue among many, for the organization that I work for, the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety. For those of you who might not be familiar with us, the AAA Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization created and supported by AAA to conduct and sponsor research to find ways to prevent injuries and save lives on our roads. In the AAA family, we call our roadside assistance providers roadside heroes, not just the ones who work for AAA. Whether you drive a tow truck or other roadside service vehicle as a AAA employee, a contractor, a competitor to AAA, the state DOT, or anybody else. If a motorist is involved in a crash, their car breaks down, and they're stranded on the side of the highway, and you're one of the brave men or women who go out there to help them, you're a roadside hero to us. And at the AAA Foundation, we are always mindful that we literally could not exist without the work of AAA's roadside heroes. So finding ways to save their lives and protect them, make sure they make it home at the end of the day, that is especially important. It's personal to us. Incident responders, including AAA roadside heroes, safety service patrollers, firefighters, EMS providers, law enforcement officers, they go to work every day to help complete strangers, potentially someday including you or me, in what might quite possibly be one of the very most vulnerable moments of our lives. And as you just heard from Joe in the previous presentation, we unfortunately lose about one responder every single week. At least 279 so far since the beginning of 2020. And if I were giving this presentation a couple months ago, I might sound a little bit more cheerful as I'm talking about these numbers. Of course, no death of any roadside assistance provider or emergency responder is ever acceptable. But up through September 2025 was looking pretty good so far. October, bad month. Starting off in October, we lost 4 roadside heroes in a 7-day stretch. And then shortly thereafter, 3 law enforcement officers in a row, closing out the month with another death of a roadside assistance provider. I'm just going to list those right now. First, Sandel de la Cruz in Laurel, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. on October 4th of this year. Followed 2 days later by Mr. William Hinka in Fayetteville, North Carolina on October 6th. Very next day, we lost Carlos Trejo Jr. in Los Angeles. 3 days after that, we lost Mr. Jacob Allen Marquise, just 18 years old, in Earl, Arkansas on October 10th. That's the 4 and 7 days. But it wasn't over. The bad month of October was just getting started. Week went by relatively quiet, but then we lost a law enforcement officer 3 days in a row. On October 16th, we lost Trooper Nicholas Caton of Canfield, Ohio, followed the very next day by Sergeant Thomas Duran of El Reno, Oklahoma. The day after that, Officer Lauren Craven of Granville, California. And finally, before the month would end, we lost Ethan Schultz, a roadside service technician. He was struck and killed by a passing vehicle while he was helping a disabled motorist on the shoulder of the interstate in New Jersey. And every one of those names, in fact, is from a list compiled by Joe's organization, the Emergency Responder Safety Institute. And finally, as we were eager to close the book on that terrible October, we picked up right back where we left off at the beginning of November when Mr. Jose Reyes, a tow operator helping a disabled motorist on the interstate in Los Angeles, he was struck and killed. And this doesn't even include all of the Good Samaritans and the stranded motorists themselves who are struck and killed on the side of the road. The latest data we have on them is from way back in 2023. but it shows we lost over 400 disabled motorists and Good Samaritans that year. And that's on top of all the incident response personnel that we just talked about. And research we released last year at the beginning of 2024 on the deaths of roadside assistance providers showed that while each and every one of these tragedies has its own unique contributing factors, what every single one of them has in common is that on some level, they all involved a driver who failed to slow down or move over. So why didn't they? That's what we're trying to figure out. At the end of October, we just released a new comprehensive technical report on our latest research investigating reasons why motorists don't always slow down or move over when they're passing an emergency responder or a disabled vehicle on the side of the road. And also putting forward some recommendations for what we can do better. And before I move on, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge our colleagues at Westat who conducted this work for us, as well as partners at the Governor's Highway Safety Association and the University of Maryland, who led key parts of the study, as well as several state DOTs that made this work possible. So if any of you all are on the line today, just want to thank you so much for making this research possible. And now I'll just provide a quick high-level overview of what the project consisted of, and then we'll get into what we learned. So first, the team started off documenting the details of every state's slow down, move over law. And I'll touch a little bit more on that last question that just came up after the previous presentation too. Then the team surveyed state highway safety stakeholders to understand some of the sorts of public information and education efforts going on out there in the world, how these laws are enforced, key frustrations faced by stakeholders, as well as areas where stakeholders are looking to do more. After that, the team conducted focus groups with drivers in 10 states, total of over 130 drivers, to dig into what drivers knew or what they thought they knew about their state's laws, what they do when they come upon an incident on the road, what motivates them to take the actions they take, and what might help motivate them or their fellow drivers to perhaps do some things differently. Then we looked at what drivers are actually doing out there in the world, because it's one thing to ask them what they do. It's quite another to directly observe it and see what they're actually doing. So our research team worked with DOTs in 13 states to access video from traffic management cameras on their highways, zoom in on incidents where there was a responder on the side of the road in view of the camera, and just look at what drivers did as they passed by. And finally, our research team put all the pieces together, came up with some recommendations to try to improve driver behavior and compliance with these slow down, move over laws. So what did we find? So every state has some form of slow down, move over law, which is a start, but the details are really all over the place. When we looked at what kinds of vehicles the law applies to, in 28 states, the law now covers all stopped or disabled vehicles on the road or on the shoulder. In some cases requiring, if it's a ordinary passenger vehicle, requiring them to be displaying their hazards or cones or flares or some such. But in any event, 28 states now cover all stopped or disabled vehicles. But the remainder, 22 states and the District of Columbia only apply the law to some vehicles, but not others. 6 jurisdictions only apply when there's an emergency responder, a law enforcement officer, firefighter, emergency medical services on the side of the road. And then another 17 includes some various other specific types of vehicles, for example, municipal vehicles, utility vehicles, road maintenance vehicles, but there's a lot of variation in those laws. And then beyond the vehicle types, okay, so there's a responder on the side of the road, the law applies. So now the question becomes, What does the law require a passing motorist to do? In most states, the law basically boils down to if you can move over, you got to move over. But if you can't move over, then you have to slow down. But not all states do it that way. In a handful of states, 13 by our count, the law requires drivers to both slow down and move over. That is, even if you move over, you still have to slow down too. And slow down, what does that mean? In most states, it basically means whatever it means to you. And that's exactly as helpful as it sounds. That's as specific as what they get. They tell you that you can, quote unquote, proceed with caution, exercise due care, some such phrasing. A few states, on the other hand, actually specify what slowdown means. And still, those requirements, they vary a great deal. In many cases, the state requires you to slow down by 10 or 15 or 20 miles an hour below the posted speed limit, perhaps with different rules for relatively low speed roads. One state says if you can't move over, you have to slow down to 25 miles an hour. That's right, not slow down by 25 miles an hour, slow down to 25 miles an hour. And a couple of states have these great big complicated decision trees that I personally puzzled over for hours and still couldn't even figure out. You could tell in many cases the intent was good. You could even argue that the requirements themselves were perfectly sensible. But for somebody driving down the highway with perhaps 3 to 5 seconds to make a decision about what to do, it arguably isn't realistic to expect them to go, if you have this and this and this and this, then this is the action that you take. But no, I have this and this and this and that. So I'm supposed to do this other thing. In real time, it's just too much. In the penalties, they varied by nearly a factor of 100. In 16 states, the fine for a first offense, absent any aggravating circumstances, was $100 or less, with the lowest being $30, which is less than a parking ticket in a lot of places. On the other end of the spectrum, a couple of states sometimes imposed fines of over $1,000, including a few where a violation is a misdemeanor criminal offense punishable by a fine of thousands of dollars and or time in jail. And a few states give drivers points on their license. Most of them don't. When we surveyed and interviewed state highway safety offices and law enforcement representatives, something we heard again and again was the law is enforced, but really, pretty much only on special occasions. Education and outreach efforts, everybody was putting in a good effort, but the scope and really the funding, the resources available to go into this, they varied a great deal. Everybody clearly acknowledged the value of multi-agency collaborations, but some of the stakeholders also noticed some of the complications that those kinds of collaborations can introduce. We also heard about states' frustrations with data. A couple of states have these really nice dashboards where they track slow down, move over related crashes and citations. But most states don't compile and aggregate those statistics in any way that's readily usable. In a lot of states, there seems to be some openness to improving these laws, especially around what types of vehicles are protected and in moving from only requiring slowing down as plan B if you're unable to move over to requiring slowing down all the time. So those were some of the big takeaways we found from our interviews with stakeholders. When we got in our focus groups and talked directly with drivers, again, this is from over 130 drivers, good mix of ages, sex, levels of education, driving experience, spread across 10 states with different laws. These are some of the key themes that emerged. No matter who you ask, they all tell you, I always move over. All those other drivers, not so much. But me, of course, always, every single time, I move over. when we get to really talking with them in the focus groups, we find, okay, maybe it's not quite as simple as that. There's some times when people admit they don't move over, especially if there's a vehicle in the lane next to them. So they don't have room to move over. They can't move over. So now what? Well, apparently, most of the time, they just keep going. They seem to forget all about the slowdown part. In some states, the law, again, says they still need to slow down, even if they move over. But in the rest of the states, if they're unable to move over, they too need to slow down. But for a lot of people, slow down, move over seems to get translated as pretty much move over. But if they can't move over, they don't move over, they don't slow down either. It's as if that first half of slow down, move over just sort of gets lost. It doesn't really take. People don't seem to be getting that message. And there's probably some opportunity for some improvement there. On the laws, there is halfway decent awareness that slow down, move over laws exist. In the focus groups, 40% of the drivers coming in before we even got into talking about them, 40% of the drivers knew that their state had such a law. And in a separate large-scale national survey that I just want to make a quick plug for, we'll be releasing this in the first quarter of 2026. A separate large-scale national survey, we found about 2/3 of drivers had at least heard of slow down, move over laws, and were at least fairly confident that their state had one. But in both the focus groups and in that larger national survey, even among people who on some level knew that there was a law, knowledge of the details was not so good. Pretty much everybody who knew about the existence of the law in the first place, they knew it said something about moving over, and they knew that they had to do it when they saw police on the side of the road. But beyond that, knowledge was not so good. Awareness that the law applied to tow trucks was significantly lower. It applies to tow trucks in every single state. But awareness of that considerably lower. And in the 28 states where it applies to literally every stopped or disabled vehicle on the side of the road, including a disabled vehicle all by itself, unaccompanied by any responders, awareness in those states that was the case was very, very poor. And there's hardly any awareness of the details or even the existence of the requirements to slow down. A lot of the drivers who proudly proclaimed that they always move over, they said they did this out of courtesy or because it was the right thing to do, not necessarily because of the law. And just one more little teaser for that forthcoming national survey. In states where slowing down is always required, even if you also move over, hardly anybody is aware of that. Even if you just look at people who are aware that there is a slow down, move over law to begin with, less than 1 in 5 drivers in those states where slowing down is always required, less than 1 in 5 of them are aware that that's the case. Another thing that came through loud and clear in these focus groups, virtually nobody is concerned about getting pulled over or cited for violating the slow down, move over law. People pointed out, in all fairness, probably correctly, that when responders are present on the scene, they're busy focusing on the incident. They're there for what they're there for, and they're unlikely to up and leave the scene to go chase down somebody for violating the slow down, move over law. And of the 135 focus group participants we had, 3 of them had actually been stopped for violating the slow down, move over law. And how many of them got a citation for it? None. 0. All 3 got off with warnings, which to them reaffirmed that there's basically no risk of violating the law. So we need to be a little more creative about how we can create a true and credible perception that these laws actually are being enforced. When we looked at awareness of the penalties for violating the laws, awareness was not high. Though again, people weren't too worried about the penalties because they didn't think there was any real risk of getting pulled over in the first place. When we told people about what the penalties were in their state, Many of the participants in the states with those really low fines, like $30 or $50, people were surprised at how low it was. And they said they thought it should be higher. They weren't proposing to make it thousands and thousands of dollars, but people didn't think $30 or $50 was in line with the seriousness of the danger posed by failing to slow down or move over. People thought the fines should be roughly in line with some other kinds of violations that pose real threats to safety. Some people said, without any prompting from the researchers, they thought that a slow down, move over law violation should be treated more like a school zone violation, for example. That was an example that people cited a few times. Opinions were more mixed in states where the penalties were a lot higher, like multiple thousands of dollars, or possibly a criminal conviction and jail time. Not everybody was opposed to those, but people weren't complaining that the fines were too low in those states. One state where the penalty was $500 and 2 points on a driver's license for a first slow down, move over violation. Most focus group participants actually felt that was a reasonable, appropriate penalty for the offense. Some other things, though, they're better learned by other methods rather than just asking people. So in our study, 13 states generously shared videos with our research team to give us a total of more than 15 hours of video of cars passing 169 different incident scenes across those 13 states. This is an example of a video we got from a traffic management camera from the North Carolina DOT. See if I can make it play again. So here we see a tow truck helping a stranded motorist over on the left shoulder there. You can see that around the middle of your screen. And the colored boxes are just showing us what the research team's algorithm is seeing. The red boxes, those are vehicles that neither slow down nor move over. The green ones do slow down or move over. And the yellow boxes, if you see any of those are cases where it looks like the vehicle tried to move over but didn't quite make a complete lane change. The blue ones, don't worry about the blue ones. They're not in a lane adjacent to the incident scene, so they're not required to take any special action. This specific video, unfortunately, we do not see a whole lot of slowing down or moving over. A few vehicles do, but most of them do not. Only a couple slowed down to any meaningful degree, and we see a whole lot of failure to move over here as well. Fortunately, they're not all this bad. Here's another one from the same state, also from the North Carolina Department of Transportation. But this time, check this out. Almost everybody is moving over. There's a police car over there attending to what appears to be the aftermath of a mild fender bender. Maybe people are moving over because they see the law enforcement officer there. Again, that came up in the focus groups. People are more aware of the requirements when there's a law enforcement officer on the scene, and support for moving over when there's a law enforcement officer on the scene just tends to be higher. Or maybe it's just something about the part of town, time of day where they are. Maybe everybody's just sort of following the example of the car in front of them. So basically, everybody's moving over because everybody else is moving over. But after the last video, it was nice to see a real world example of people actually doing the right thing here. You even see some people in the second lane slowing down to make room for their neighbors to move over. So credit to them for that. And when we add up all the 12,000 plus vehicles in the 15 plus hours of video, this is what we find. A slight majority of drivers moved over. A very small proportion of drivers did not move over, but they still slowed down. And a similarly small proportion both slowed down and moved over. And a little more than 1 in 3 didn't either. On that really small percentage of drivers that slowed down, I should note, for the purpose of the study, the way we operationalized slow down was a speed reduction of at least 20%. And I realize that sounds like A, kind of a lot, and B, arbitrary. We just did that because we couldn't really measure absolute speed reliably from these videos, but we could estimate relative speed or change in speed. So that was the best we could do. So what we counted as slowing down was, for example, slowing from 70 miles an hour down to 56, that's 20%. From 60 down to 48, that's 20%. But again, that's admittedly arbitrary. So we did another analysis where we looked at everybody who slowed down by at least 10%, say 70 down to 63, 60 down to 54. When we did that, the percentage of drivers that slowed down on the positive side, it about doubled. And doubling is good when we're talking about a good behavior. But when you start this low, you double it and you're still at less than 1 in 5 drivers slowing down. And I should also note, there is a ton of variation between states and even between incident scenes like the two I just showed you. In some videos, like the first one you just saw, virtually nobody slows down or moves over. In other videos, like that second one, a lot of drivers, even the majority of them do. And the graph on the screen here is just averaging over all that. And finally, drawing from all that information and with the additional input from more than 60 representatives of state highway safety offices, departments of transportation, law enforcement agencies, the research team developed a list of recommended actions for how the community can move forward to get drivers to slow down, move over. I'll just provide a quick rundown of the recommendations here, but there's a lot more in our report, and I'll show you a link for that report at the end too. So the recommendations fell into 3 main buckets: strengthening the laws themselves, enforcing them, and educating the public. On legislation, again, every state has a law, but they're kind of all over the place in terms of what they require. In states that don't already cover all stopped or disabled vehicles, there's an opportunity there. Also, specifying what slow down means and when you have to do it. And last, but certainly not least, making sure these laws are a whole lot simpler, clearer, and easier for a normal person to understand. On the enforcement side, again, almost everybody in our study saw the risk of getting caught for violating one of these laws as quite minimal. Even a couple of them who had been slowed down or pulled over characterized the likelihood of it happening again as slim to none. And we're going to have to come up with a feasible and acceptable way to create the perception among the public that these laws actually are enforced. And finally, on education, lots of opportunities. What does the law require drivers to do? Yes, move over. But it's important not to forget about that other part, the slow down part. And when? What vehicles does the law apply to? Most people know that the law applies when there is a police officer there. But what about tow trucks? What about utility vehicles? What about ordinary disabled vehicles without any responders present on the scene? Does the law apply to them too? It looks like we really need more education on that front. And a lot of people don't seem to realize again, about the slow down requirement, especially in states where it's always required. People seem to be broadly unaware that slowing down is always required in the states where it is. And last, I want to highlight in our focus groups as well as in our interviews with stakeholders, a recurring theme that came up was the value of showing that in our education, the human cost of non-compliance, not just numbers, not just statistics, not just information about the fines, not just information about the penalties, but the actual human cost in terms of again, not just the numbers. Who is this impacting? Who are the victims? Who are the victims' families? Again, lots more in our report. And you can visit our website, AAAfoundation.org, to find a copy of the report, where you can also scan this UR code here, and it'll take you straight to the report. And finally, if you want to follow up with me later, after the call or in the future, here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. Thank you all for your time, and I'll turn it back over to Jamie.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And when Brian started, I did drop the link for the report right into the chat pod. When we finish Q&A and pass this along to the next speaker, I'll drop it one more time. But we do have a few questions that came in for you, Brian. The very first one is, does the research include information on the controllable factors with respect to the emergency responders? Controllable factors are things we can change, whereas the driver behavior and other factors like animal or debris are things in which we have little to no control.
So this study was really focused on driver awareness and driver understanding and driver behaviors, but we do have several other studies that have looked into some of these factors, including we have a study that you can also find on our website, again, AAAfoundation.org, that really shows the effectiveness of those arrow boards and the vehicle mounted variable message signs. We have another study that looks at the additive effectiveness of temporary traffic control devices like cones and flares. And we have some research going on right now that's focused on the various lighting configurations on the roadside service vehicles. So apologies, there's a long-winded answer. This study, no, but we have lots of other resources on that.
Another question that came in for you was, with enforcement and strong penalties, how did the judges handle these cases? Are they being thrown out if they get to court?
That's, to be completely honest, that's not something that I'm equipped to speak to on this call. We did see that overall, there were quite few drivers who had any experience with having been stopped or pulled over. But then what happens in the event that they are charged, that was beyond the scope of this study. I apologize.
The last question that came in for you, Brian, is this person is saying that in their travels, they see that folks move over into traffic without waiting for a clearance. So in other words, they're creating another hazard. Is this something that you saw in your research?
I'd say we saw in our focus groups with drivers that a lot of people did describe situations where they didn't feel safe or comfortable moving over because of the surrounding traffic conditions. When we were looking at the videos, for example, that second one I showed, to be honest, I was surprised that a few of the drivers moved over when they did, because as I pointed out in the video, there were a few examples of other drivers actually slowing down and yielding to make room for them to move over. But there are some situations where it seemed real tight, and I was getting nervous watching the drivers move over. So I think this really goes back to the finding from our survey and from our focus groups that drivers are broadly unaware of the other half of the slow down, move over law, the slow down part, because nobody wants drivers to be creating a hazard, making an erratic maneuver at 75 miles an hour to move over when it would be safer to slow down. And I think that's really not only the importance of making sure you move over safely, although that's a very important thing that I think we need to emphasize, but just the option to slow down is always there. In some states, that's actually not an option. You're required to do that. But even in states where the move over is placed as primary in the context of the law, if you're unable to move over because of the traffic situation, you can and you should. And actually, you're required to slow down. And that's something that drivers seem to really not be getting. And coming into this and even looking at the focus groups, it was really tempting to think that drivers were we're just ignoring that requirement, or just they're in a hurry, they don't want to slow down. But in the national survey that we're going to be releasing early next year, we see the vast majority of drivers are legitimately unaware that there's any slow down requirement in the slow down, move over law. People's mental model of slow down, move over law seems to be move over law. And we really need to do something about that.
Brian, thank you for sharing the important research that you did. I did drop it back in the chat pod along with the main webpage for AAA Foundation. So that way you can follow up again for the other report that Brian just mentioned will be released next year as well. Now we're going to move to two other speakers that are going to talk a little bit about some of the technology that can be used to help protect some of our responders as well. And our first presentation on that is going to be from the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. So we now have Justin Neff, who is the manager for the traffic management program at the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, which is a metropolitan planning organization in the Philadelphia area. One of his roles is to facilitate traffic incident management task forces through the 9-county region, working with first responders, DOTs, and other transportation professionals to make the roadways safer for all road users. And again, I do realize that our next two presentations may be a little bit more urban than we typically do have, but it is very important information that hopefully these technologies can be used as well in rural areas. So I'm going to turn it over now to Justin. Justin?
Excellent. Thank you, Jamie. Can you see my screen okay?
Looks great.
Excellent. And Brian, that was a perfect segue, despite some of the takeaways and findings. Perfect lead into this. And a plug for AAA. I'm able to attend a meeting in Reading, Pennsylvania, hosted by AAA. And they often discuss topics such as this. And actually, the move over law is one of the common discussion topics. And they often invite the district attorney's office to the meeting to discuss why drivers are often not officially cited or fined. So I encourage just to expand the conversation and involve everyone in that solution, not just law enforcement. So thank you everyone for attending today. Thank you to Jamie and Dana for the invitation. So as Jamie said, I work with the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. We are the MPO for the Philadelphia region. And while we have what is traditionally thought of as the sort of roadways that you find in urban areas, the extremely crowded, limited access roadways, the congested urban core, we are also a pretty diverse region in terms of landscape and roads. So we have our, on the outskirts, we have our very rural areas. Actually, this picture on the bottom right and the picture on the top right is a mile from my office and the bottom right is a mile from my house. So you can jump around quite a bit within our region and capture all sorts of roadways and travel conditions. And then on the outskirts, we also have an Amish community. One of our after action reviews, one of our task force meetings actually involved a horse and buggy and a motorcycle. So we cover quite the range of modes. So this topic, digital alerting, I'm going to weave in not just the actual project, but how it came to be. So the starting point occurred at one of our traffic incident management task force meetings. I have the exact date because I was actually taking the notes for this meeting. And the Pennsylvania Turnpike shared that they were looking into the Haas Alert system to put on their maintenance vehicles. And as it says here, it will automatically send an alert when emergency lights are activated. And I can honestly say that I had no idea what that meant. And I reached out to the representative who's speaking about that. And perhaps some on this meeting know him, Todd Lease. He seems to be I'm actually surprised he's not on this panel because he seems to be every meeting I'm at, stealing my thunder. So this is about how we went from having no idea what Haas Alert, what digital alerting was back in 2019 to today. We currently have 168 agencies, close to 700 vehicles, and to date, over 2 million alerts have been sent out to drivers. Now, what does that mean? What are these alerts? So digital alerting, and I may be using Haas Alert synonymously with it, but that's simply the vendor that we're using. There are other forms of digital alerting. What it does is when an emergency vehicle's lights are activated, it sends an alert to an approaching driver that there is an emergency vehicle ahead. It doesn't give them any specific instructions. It does not say slow down, move over, move to the left, move to the right. It simply says there is something different up ahead. And this is currently, at least the vendor that we have, it's in Apple Maps. It is in Waze. It is not yet in, or it is not in Google Maps. There's always a hope. So it does not capture every single navigational app, but then it's also in in many vehicles. It automatically pops up. So it gives the driver that additional time to do something, to perhaps that's slow down, perhaps that's move over, perhaps that's even to take a completely different route. And then, so that's what digital alerting is. It's to provide another level of protection for responders. Now, our traffic incident management task forces, of which we have 8 in the Philadelphia region, our primary purpose, and we have a multitude of reasons for meeting, but our primary purpose is to prevent struck bys. We discuss after action reviews, we discuss construction, we discuss communication, a whole multitude of topics come up, but our primary objective is responder safety. It's to prevent this from happening. And these are all images from our region. The one on the left and bottom right are members of our task forces. The top right is in Delaware, just outside of our area. That one resulted in a fatality of the driver. So what we saw internally at DVRPC was we saw that the purpose of our task forces is to improve responder safety. And the purpose of the digital alerting is to improve responder safety. So perhaps there's a way that we could harness or amplify both to try to spread this message. So initially what we did is we invited Haas to present to our meetings and share this technology, not to pitch, not to try to sell that specific vendor, but to let responders know that there was something else out there that could improve their safety out on the roadway. But what we discovered pretty quickly is that there's not a line item for this. So whereas, yes, fire trucks are extremely expensive, as was mentioned earlier, there's at least a line item for it, and people know what that is. You can go for this sort of funding. So you can spend millions of dollars almost easier than you can spend a few $1,000s because there's no line item for digital alerting, at least not at this moment, or emerging technologies. So what we thought was, well, perhaps we, DVRPC, as the MPO, could play a bigger role in this. There was one problem: we didn't have any money. We couldn't purchase any of these. All we could do was continue to spread the word of this technology. But there were things we could do. We had a lot of conversations, not just with response agencies, but with DOTs, with our internal executive management team, with the decision makers of the value of this. We went after a lot of grants. We got rejected by the grants. We asked a lot of questions, not just of responders, but also of digital alerting firms in terms of how can we sell this or promote it better. We got a lot of blank stares. Really, when some of our first conversation with the DOTs, they just did not see the value of it. They were worried about congestion. How does this minimize congestion? And that is not necessarily how we were, or the purpose that we were trying to share. But we had a lot of conversation. We turned those stares into regular stares. And I will say all of those steps were absolutely essential, because after some pretty impressive financial jujitsu, we did get funding. We were able to reallocate money that we had internally. And we just kept going until someone said no, and no one said no. So we ended up getting funding for this program. But then the question was, well, what do we do? It was much easier when we said, oh, we should have some money, we can do X, Y, and Z. Suddenly we had money to implement digital alerting throughout this region, throughout the Philadelphia region. But we didn't quite know what that meant. We didn't know who we were going to work with, what that was going to look like, what agencies would be involved. But we broke it into two primary tasks. First is we needed a vendor. We assumed it would be Haas Alert because that was the only vendor that we were aware of. Ultimately, we ended up having 4 vendors submit applications or submit through our RFP process, and not one of them was Haas. What we found out later is the installation process was such a large part of this program that they needed to be secondary on this. So they partnered with an organization called Newcom, and Newcom handled the installation, and then Haas provided both the equipment and then also the actual the dashboard that would be shared. So ultimately we ended up with these 2 vendors, but then we also needed agencies to participate in this program. We had talked about it, they'd shown interest, but we did not have a defined list. So we needed to decide which agencies would be involved. Some of it we based on high roadway volume, but then there was a discussion that speeds are just as big of a concern as is volume. So there was a lot of discussion internally, externally with our partners. We used some mapping. We wanted to identify agencies that were within a certain distance of limited access roadways. And that wasn't the single factor, but that was something that was used as a determining factor. We ultimately ended up, this is a 3-phase program. We ultimately ended up with just over 100 agencies in the first phase. And what that meant is we is kind of a subjective term, needed to install Haas Alert devices in 100 different agencies across a 9-county region. We were naive with how easy that was going to be. We said it was going to be, we thought it'd be tricky. We had no idea what that actually meant. So this is what a Haas Alert, a Haas device looks like. It needs to be installed in a vehicle without any detrimental impact to that vehicle. And that was essential. We did have some hiccups along the way where we got some emails afterwards that, hey, our lights don't turn on. Hey, our lights turn on when they're not supposed to. And it required a lot of back and forth coordination. But starting in October of last year, our installation team went around to 105 agencies to install these devices. Now, some of the challenges were the clearly defined roles. We had 3 primary organizations. It was DVRPC, it was Haas, and it was Newcom. And then it was also 105 response agencies. And it was a lot of, well, who was running point on this? If there's an issue, who do they reach out to? Who handles all the scheduling? If you look back, this is the Haas device, but there's also an opportunity to simply tie directly into the county system, which we thought would actually be easier. Well, we didn't let the counties know that this was coming because we didn't realize they had to be made aware. And that brought in another stakeholder who certainly wanted this program to succeed, but they did not have this kind of baked into their workflow for a certain number of months. So we had again work with them to move this forward. Some liability issues in terms of if there was any damage done during the installation, and then unknowns that really continue to pop up to this day. One of the approaches that we took to try to bring everyone together was create an installation map, so we know when the installations were occurring, when they were scheduled, when they were done, any sort of additional notes that could be included, just so we were all playing off the same sheet of music. Here's just a few examples of some of the emails that were bouncing back and forth. Again, we had close to 500 vehicles that need to be installed across 100 agencies, and there were individuals throwing emails back and forth. Better time frame for the installation. The vehicle that you want, it's out. I just made aware that the vehicle's at a different location. And then this was one, whenever we were told that someone looked forward to hearing back from us, it really meant get on the phone and call me immediately. And these were the ones I usually forwarded to my boss to handle. But I will say everyone really stepped up, all three of the primary organizations involved. Really proud of this project. I will say it's one of the, at least the first of its kind that I'm aware of, at least to this scale. So although we had challenges, people stepped up to address those challenges. This is a snapshot of the roughly 160, 170 agencies that we have. They're not all mapped on here, and some are covered up, but this gives you kind of an idea of the blanket coverage that we have throughout the region. We do not have Philadelphia Fire Department on here, and that is certainly an organization that we would like to bring in to the program, but we don't have them yet. This is what the operational map looks like. So DVRPC has the ability to see all of the vehicles that are currently equipped with Haas Alert, and then each agency is able to see their own vehicle on here. If you zoom in a little closer during an incident, you can actually click on it to see the exact location, to see when it arrived at an event. And then if it's on its way, it gives you the mile per hour. So it provides situational awareness to agencies, although that was not the how we pitched it. That was not our primary purpose. It does provide that for response agencies. At the end of each month, agencies are given a report of how many alerts were sent out. The one on the left is not our most recent one because as I said, we have currently 2.2 million alerts sent out. But we have been told that agencies really enjoy getting these reports. They share it during training. There's a lot more data here than we currently know what to do with, but the agencies do find this to be extremely valuable. From time to time, you'll see them posted on social media as well, letting their areas know that the emergency response vehicles have this technology. Some other functionality elements that we're continuing to find is something like trip. So you're able to select a vehicle and see where it went over the last 24 hours. So this actually shows a police vehicle in Westchester. It shows just everywhere it went within a 24-hour span. This is a safety service patrol vehicle. Oh, and that's actually something that I forgot to add. We were able to also fold in 20 PennDOT safety service patrol vehicles into this program for honestly reasons I don't quite understand. It was easier for us to do it versus the DOT. So this shows a route that a safety service patrol vehicle took over a 24-hour period. And then in the orange, you can see where its lights were activated. So some of the takeaways and next step, really the communication relationships were absolutely vital for this program, not only to get agencies on board, but when hiccups did occur, the fact that everyone stepped up to the plate, no one kicked the can down the road. Even when there were bumps in the road, it almost strengthened the relationship because everyone did step up to the plate to address it. There is a massive amount of data. We have discussions with the DOT of what to do with this. We have discussions internally. I can say, frankly, we don't know what we're doing with this because it wasn't, we didn't realize we were going to be getting so much when we kicked off this program. Integration with other partners. So there's a capability to tie this in. So if a fire department responds to the Pennsylvania Turnpike, there's a way to provide that information to the Turnpike. Granted, the fire department would have to allow it, and it would provide another level of situational awareness. And we're not at this point, but it is a potential next step. And we're currently guaranteed a phase 3. We're in the midst of phase 2. We're guaranteed a phase 3, and then we're not quite sure what comes after that. But as of now, we're extremely optimistic, and despite any bumps in the roads, all agencies have been extremely pleased with this program. And then really this last one is key. It's opened the idea to new partnerships. First responders aren't always seen as a key player with MPOs, and that door kind of goes both ways. But this made them, both parties, willing to work and discuss, and also be open to new technologies, and share information and ideas moving forward. So that is presentation. Happy to take any questions if there is time.
Perfect. We do have a few minutes, and we have a few questions for you as well. The very first one is, how many staff did your organization have working on this for very roughly what percentage of their time?
We had about 3 and then 1 left, and there were 2 of us working on it a lot. I'll say a lot, but we had a lot, actually, we had a lot of support from our financial department, from our procurement team. There was a lot more teamwork with individuals that we typically don't work with to get this program up off the ground. I think the fact that there were so many unknowns actually helped us, because if we knew all the issues we'd run into, we may have been more hesitant to take it on from the jump.
The next question is, have crashes with responder vehicles decreased?
We're hesitant to make that claim. Anecdotally, responders have said they've noticed a difference. We have not done any statistical analysis to support that. We have grand visions of getting someone in here to do some actual data analysis. And I know the Pennsylvania Turnpike was in the midst of doing some of that sort of work. It just requires being able to work with data that at least our department is not currently equipped with. Hopefully we're able to, because then we'll really be able to promote this program far and wide.
And that kind of leads to our last question for you, and that is, do you have any recommendations for how to possibly get this type of system out to other states and the federal level?
Start having the conversation, start asking, bring it up in meetings. The DOT seemed very receptive to bringing it into construction projects, long-term construction projects. That was a way to make it a line item. So if you know something, you're going to have 10 miles of roadway under construction for 6, 12, 18 months, make that a line item for any of the agencies that respond. And it's such a minimal amount compared to what a construction project costs. So we're actually still hoping to make some headway in that direction, but we have not at this point.
And I was mistaken, there's one question that I missed that came in through the chat pod that I want to make sure we ask you as well. You mentioned that Haas Alerts appears in Apple Maps, Waze, and many vehicles, but not in Google Maps. Do you know if there's any signs of hope for them adding it to Google Maps? Their user base is huge, so their non-participation creates a big gap, according to the questioner.
I would say that there's hope, but that is hope being told to us by Haas. So I can't say one way or another.
Perfect.
Hopefully they come on board.
Thank you so much for sharing all this information. It's a great project. I've heard about a couple of instances of this across the country, which is why we're very lucky that you would come, Justin, and talk about this today. We do have two presenters for our final presentations. I'm going to read through their bios right now, and then we'll pass the webinar along to them. Our first is Eric Gordon, who's the Assistant Traffic Operations Engineer at the Florida Department of Transportation Turnpike Enterprise. As part of the Traffic Operations Department at the Florida Turnpike Enterprise, Eric gets involved with traffic engineering and operations, incident management, intelligent transportation systems, transportation system management and operations, research projects, and more recently, connected and automated vehicles. Eric is currently serving as the president of the Florida Puerto Rico District of ITE and enjoys participating on statewide teams, including Target Zero, the Traffic Incident Management statewide team, and the Safe Mobility for Life Coalition. In addition, we'll have Michael Washburn also presenting. Michael is the Incident Management Program Manager for Florida's Turnpike Enterprise, part of the Florida Department of Transportation. He oversees and manages the Turnpike's Road Ranger Safety Service Patrol, the Turnpike's specialty tow contracts, and coordinates traffic incident management training and response for Turnpike employees and contractors. He is a certified national traffic incident management trainer and has extensive experience in traffic management center and emergency operations. And I'm excited again to turn over our presentation to these two presenters, Eric and Michael.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you for reaching out. Thank you to the National Center for Rural Road Safety and our other presenters, Joe, Brian, and Justin. I hope that when Mike and I present, this is a wonderful opportunity. I feel like there's going to be a lot of synergy in our presentation. I know I've taken a lot of copious notes and want to continue that dialogue. So first, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Florida's Turnpike and our system. And let me go to the next slide here. So I wanted to point out that Florida's Turnpike Enterprise, we serve over 29 counties in Florida. Significant portions of our roadway are in Orlando. We stretch all the way from Orlando down to Miami. But in between Miami and Orlando, for anybody who's visited the Central Florida area or the South Florida region, we actually have quite a few counties that we would consider rural. Counties like Martin County, St. Lucie County, Indian River County, and they're all located between Miami and Orlando. So if you're on that stretch, you might actually see some cattle, a little bit of citrus, not as much as it used to be, and other crops. So I am excited to say that a lot of our system is rural, including portions that we're building around Jacksonville and then north of Tampa. We're extending north in Tampa, so our system's growing. We're about at 564 miles currently. And out of that, I calculated this morning that we're at about 200 miles. So 200 miles out of the 564, I would consider to be pretty much a rural area. We like to say we serve over 85% of the population of the state of Florida. So we consider ourselves to be a statewide corridor that ties together rural counties with Florida's economic center. So we're not just an urban facility. On this slide, wanted to point out a couple of quick facts. I got tired of changing the number of total miles on our system because we continue to grow, and we're continuing to grow with the amount of visitors and people who are moving to our state every year. So I just put 511 plus. But I wanted to point out that we have 3 million customers that we serve on a daily basis. And of course, along with all of those customers comes a significant portion of disabled and abandoned vehicles on our roadway. I would like to highlight also that we do have 8 service plazas. These offer a 24/7 service. And out of those 8 service plazas, I consider 4 of them to be in fairly rural areas. They're definitely not urban. Some of them are transitioning to suburban, but they're considered rural this day, 4 out of 8. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time recognizing our UCF, University of Central Florida team. I gathered some slides from a presentation that we co-presented earlier this year here at the Turnpike to try and focus on a study of disabled and abandoned vehicles on Florida's Turnpike Enterprise and other FDOT roadways. So it wasn't just focused on the Turnpike. Here today, we have Dr. Adrian Sant, PhD. So he and I co-presented earlier this year. He's at UCF. And then also our principal investigator, Dr. Haitham Aldik, recognized both of those gentlemen for being a key and instrumental part of our research project. And I wanted to point out that our research project, actually, the final report, I received it back in September of 2022. So even though it's been a few years, excited to highlight some things here. So I'm going to quickly go through this. Our team looked at the number of disabled and abandoned vehicle crashes. We wanted to know, how bad is the safety problem? It was very significant, 1,256 of those crashes. We considered, out of the DAVs, we call them DAVs, 81% we considered disabled vehicles. Unfortunately, these all resulted in 53 fatalities, significant number of injuries, and a significant financial cost in terms of lives and injuries that have impacted our system. Not only did we look at the crash data, but we also looked at SunGuide events. So SunGuide is the advanced traffic management system that we use. It's a piece of software that we use to log all the events that occur. Out of those, in that 3 or 4 year period, 90% of disabled vehicles had occurred over that period of time, a significant number. In addition, our research team, Dr. Aldik and Dr. Sand, also looked at the number of Waze alerts that were produced during a certain period of time, 10.3 million, most significantly on our high volume roadways like I-95, I-75, and another term for Florida's Turnpike is SR 91 or State Road 91. This is a quick overview of just significant number of DAV events. Obviously, they can negatively impact our operations, cause traffic crashes, and pose a threat to motorists and responder safety. So just wanted to highlight some of the information that we looked at during the course of the research project. Again, with the bottom left, 62% disabled vehicle. So in conclusion, DAVs greatly impact. We also share everyone on this call. We want to look out for our emergency responders. We know that there is a feeling of not being safe out there. So we want to do everything we can to help them out. Some of the surveys we did, our team might have reached out, our UCF team might have reached out. We actually got responses from 60 agencies, and we looked at a number of suggestions. And I won't go into detail on a lot of those suggestions now, because Mike is going to be able to talk through some of those suggestions that we're currently working on and we're continuing to expand upon. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mike for the rest of the presentation.
Oh, good afternoon. Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to go through some of the basic operations that we have, and then talk about some of the process changes we had that really were supported and reinforced by the research that Eric and his team led. First off, I wanted just to give everyone the background that Florida's Turnpike has traffic management centers, 2 traffic management centers across the state system. We work very closely with our FHP Troop K. Troop K is a dedicated troop to the Turnpike system. So those toll roads that Eric listed are all monitored and patrolled by our FHP partner, Troop K specifically. So we work with them and kind of go where they go. Out of the TMCs, we have, as I'm sure everyone's familiar with, traffic management centers, our closed circuit television cameras. We have close to approximately 600 cameras on the system, mile by mile. We've got another nearly 300 DMS throughout the system that we're messaging for all of incidents and shoulder incidents. And then we're coordinating our Road Ranger Safety Service Patrol. Road Rangers are throughout that's the moniker throughout the state, but we have dedicated contracts to the Turnpike system. Next slide, please, Eric. Again, just a quick summary on the Road Rangers that we have. We're 24/7 across our system. We do, lose some numbers overnight, but we have full coverage as necessary. Again, as you're probably familiar with, we're out there assisting But we also have a dedicated priority giving to lane blockage events and incidents. If we have responders out there, we want to provide coverage and help with the DMS boards, aerial boards that we have when our responders are out there. We have 25 patrol zones approximately across the system, and the priority to the lane blockage is key because we feel that once they're on scene, they're helping all of our responders that might be working that incident. Obviously, in addition to when they're just doing their own assist. Go ahead, please. Something that we're very fortunate on the Turnpike in the investment that the Florida's Turnpike has done with incident management is that we have a specialty towing contracts in place across the Turnpike system where we have dedicated towers responding to dedicated committed patrol sectors. This is in place of a tow rotation. So anytime that Troop K requires an assistance of tow for a disabled vehicle or for a lane blocking incident, we know to the dedicated tower that is going to be responding out there. The contracts are required that they respond in less than 30 minutes. And we're very happy with this. Our average program wide right now for our average response, anytime Troop K calls them, is approximately 23 minutes. So we're very happy with this specialty tow contract. And this really helps us going forward with how we attack the other abandoned vehicle and disabled vehicle. Our whole program is based on trying to reduce that time on shoulder. And that's time on shoulder for not only responders, but also for our motorists and customers themselves. Go ahead, please. Our road rangers, unless they're going to a confirmed lane blocking event, they are to stop at every disabled vehicle. And once they're on scene, this is where we really looked at the issue that our research showed us that we need to do something with them. We coordinate that with the Traffic Management Center, and we look to see what the need is. If it can be assisted by the road ranger, we get them out of there. However, if not, then we really offer up a tow service. It can be a tow, by fee by the dedicated vendors, or what we call our safe courtesy tow, which is something that has been really taken off for us. Next slide, please. Safe courtesy tow is that when we launched back in 2018, we did this for specific areas of the Turnpike, but with the reinforced information from our research, we really broadened it to our system wide. And what this is that when we recognize from the Traffic Management Center and a road ranger that we have a disabled, attended disabled vehicle out there, where the driver and family might be still in the vehicle or on the side of the road. And when we get there, and if they do not want to make a tow, and that they're making their own arrangements by, having other family members come to assist or another tow company that they are trying to use, we ask them for their time frame and estimated time for that assistance to get there. If it's more than an hour, we really start pushing our safe courtesy tow program. And basically what that means is that we look to have a dedicated tow vendor or from our specialty tow contract respond and relocate them to the service plaza, free of charge to the customer. It gets them off the roadway. It gets them into a service plaza where they now can, in our view, take their time to make their own arrangements. We've had close to more than 1,200 courtesy tows to date. And when we increased the coverage to our rural zones and system wide in 22-23, that's where we've seen more than 85 or close to 80% of our courtesy tows are occurring from our rural sections. So we really think that this is something that is making a difference out there. What we also do with our Traffic Management Center in coordination with road rangers is we have a significant construction happening anywhere on the system at any given time. And this goes from Miami area all the way through north of Orlando and our off system as well in the Orlando, Tampa areas. And as everyone knows, when you have roadway construction in place, you have limitations. There's a lot of distractions. The drivers themselves are a little bit more at risk, and then you have limited shoulders. So what happens when you have a disabled vehicle in those areas? It's even more of a danger. So we have, and this really came out from, again, the research. We put protocols in place to really do more aggressive and proactive monitoring of our priority construction zones. And this is where we did have lined barrier wall, temporary barrier wall, and reduced shoulder widths. When that happens, we are, again, aggressively trying to get a road ranger out there to make that next determination if they can make the assist or not. We do have a number of vehicle tow capable road rangers that if they can get there and tow a vehicle, just relocate it out of the construction zone until the next step, we will do that. And then also we will absolutely use our safe courtesy tow program. FHP, our Highway Patrol, was hesitant to call for a tow directly without enforcing a tow onto drivers and motorists. They, felt that was putting a hindrance to, their pocketbook possibly. But if we can relocate them out of the construction zone into a service plaza where they can make their decisions, that's where we really try to focus on. And again, the rural construction zones are where those priorities occurred. North of Orlando, this is some statistics we had from north of Orlando, our Lake County Sumter areas where we have widening projects and we have reduced shoulders. These are numbers just in the last year where we had 33 courtesy tows pulled out of those construction zones. And then also these numbers, 142 DAVs being towed out. Those were where we did, when the road ranger responded, found out they couldn't make the assist, where they did call for the tow, our dedicated tower, to get them out of there. And by the customer was charged, but they got them out of there quickly and safely. So it's really been a more of a proactive approach of monitoring and responding for these disabled vehicles. Next, please. This was touched on earlier by Eric. We really had some facts that showed that disabled vehicles on the shoulder are a hazard. They become involved in secondary crashes. These numbers since 2010 or where we had disabled vehicles or abandoned vehicles become an event because of a primary incident. So a crash happened, the vehicle wasn't removed, and now we have that event itself that we have to respond to. And so we really wanted to do something different. And really the research brought those dangers reinforced for our goals. Next slide. So what we really, we sat with our Troop K, and we got the fact that our road rangers can now apply a red tag. I'm not sure if this is, I think it's similar around the country, but the only people that can really call for a tow is our law enforcement. They have to do an inventory of a vehicle and do a tow sheet to have it removed from the system. When we have an abandoned vehicle, we have current legislation in Florida Administrative Code that vehicle has to be given 6 hours before it can be removed. What this allowed us to do is with the road rangers now able to apply the red tag, it starts the clock on these vehicles, abandoned vehicles. Basically means now that when FHP does show up to a vehicle that's already been red tagged, now that time that they can take action is significantly reduced, and they can have a tow called. So we really worked with our Troop K. We did have about 6 months of coordination so that they realized that we weren't trying to take at their job. We're trying to assist them. And they became really supportive of this. It helped out with their workload as well, when we can go ahead and put a red tag and help them expedite these. We have between 500 to 600 DAVs that are applied on a monthly basis. And this can really help that removal. Next slide, please. When we really got into the nuts and bolts of this, we found out that we would red tag a vehicle, and now it became incumbent upon FHP to be able to get a trooper there. And when they are very busy, it's hard to get that authorization for the final removal from the roadway. And what we realized as well is that the Troop K command a lot of times didn't realize where some of these long long abandoned vehicles might have been, and multi-hours and such. And so this is just simple process improvement. We automated out of our Sun Guide system to FHP Troop K Command on a daily basis. Every night, by 9 a.m., the captains and lieutenants are getting an email from our system that tells them the event type of abandoned vehicles, where it is, and how long it's been out there. As you can imagine, this going to our Troop K Command really makes things happen. They'll get troopers if they see vehicles been out there for a long time frame. We launched this again in February 23, and what we've seen on average is this is reduced over an hour and a half in time frame average of these vehicles being out there. When you're dealing with more than 5,000 vehicles, abandoned vehicles a year, it again adds up to a lot of reduced time on shoulder. Next slide, please. I'm really glad we followed the previous. We do have Haas Alert on our Road Ranger fleet. That's about 34 vehicles that are outfitted. We use them, and why we gave priority for them to get the lane blocking events is because there are other responders on scene. So we want our Road Rangers to get there, provide that coverage with the MOT setups, but then also it incorporates the Haas Alert that goes out. And we have, with those 34 vehicles a month, about 90,000 plus that are being alerted to those navigation systems. And since we've had it in May of 2020, that's been about plus 4.2 million alerts going to drivers. As was stated earlier, it's not complete coverage of every driver that's approaching that incident, but it is a significant number, and everything we can do to increase that driver awareness is what we're trying to do here. The last slide we had is just kind of where we are now. We're looking to continue to grow our Safe Courtesy Tow program. We are looking at continued protocol improvement for response, and continue, focus on our construction zones in those rural areas where we need to, get to our customers quickly. We have been seeing a secondary crash trending in the right direction. I don't want to, jinx this. It's a lot of program-wide messaging and everything that we're doing to reduce those secondary crashes. But we hope that we are continue to see this trend continue to go down overall. This is still about 30 to 40 secondary crashes a month that are occurring. So we have still got a lot of work to do. And I believe that's it. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. We only have time for a couple of questions. I do have one that's come in so far. If there are any others, please put them in there quickly, and we'll go through a few of them. So the first question that we have for both of you is, how do you define or identify a secondary crash?
So that is, again, done by through our Sun Guide ATMS system. If we have a primary event and then we have another event that occurs within a mile of that event in either direction, while the other event is still ongoing, we do a review to see if that was impacted due to congestion or possibly even distraction. So we are monitoring it from our Sun Guide event and doing any queries from those locations.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was all of the questions that we have for you for right now. I just put the link to download the handout with all of the slides from today again in the chat pod. The recording for today's webinar will be posted on our website at ruralsafetycenter.org. In the archive trainings page later this week. And I do want to just thank our speakers one more time. So thank you to Joe, Brian, Justin, Eric, and Michael for taking the time out of their day today to present to us about all of these important resources, reports, and technologies that are out there. I hope that you all learned something new in honor of Crash Responder Safety Week, and take a look at the FHWA website that we posted earlier, as well as the Emergency Responder Safety one, on what other resources you can get to help promote Crash Responder Safety Week this week. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you again to our presenters.